Eli Pavon is a convener. She's an educator, she's a musician, she's a dancer, and I feel that there is something in her way of keeping time. She's literally drumming and beat keeping, but she's also passing forward information from her ancestral knowledge into the future as a teacher and performing for us right here, right now.
My name is Eli Pabon-Szebeda, and I'm a dancer, percussionist, singer, lyricist, educator, and lover of life. My first and only percussion teacher is my father. And I always wanted to play congas. I wanted to play percussion. That's what my father plays. That's what I wanted to play. The drums speak to me. I wanted to be able to make sounds using my hands. Being a percussionist, especially in the bomba world, has been traditionally for men only. Only the men can play the congas, only the men can play barril. We're seeing more and more of women learning how to play the barriles in bomba. So I think for me, it is a male-dominated instrument, but there is a lot more women stepping it and also playing. I love when I see other women playing percussion.
Would you say that being a bomba player, being a woman in this field, is an act of rebellion?
It's definitely an act of rebellion. As a luminary here at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, I had the opportunity to not only explore the museum as a visitor, but as an artist. When I walked around this massive museum of beautiful artwork, I stumbled upon The Story of Lucretia by Botticelli. And the first thing that stood out to me was the room. It brought me in, and I told myself, the painting that I'm going to do a response to is here. And that's when I saw it. And I stood and I looked at it for a while, wondering, what is the story about?
The Story of Lucretia is an ancient Roman story, but it's one that has a very persistent history. That is, it was adopted at many later points throughout Western European history as a story of an exemplary woman. And the woman is Lucretia, and she is the person at the heart of this story. Lucretia's husband was a soldier, and the king's son is familiar with his family, and so he knows that this soldier is away at battle. He covets Lucretia. He goes to her house while her husband is away at battle, and he threatens her. And what you see at the far left is Tarquin threatening her. And his threat to her is, one, if she does not submit to his advances, if she does not have sex with him, he will murder her. The second part of the threat is that once he has murdered her, he will murder his servant. And you see his servant standing just below him outside the building, and place her body next to the servant's body. And so not only will Lucretia be murdered, but and it will be clear that she was raped, but he will make it look like she was not raped by a person of her class, but by a person of a lower class, which will be an additional blow to the honor of her family. She, in the face of this threat, gives in, and Botticelli then skips to the second part. The second part is on the far right-hand side. And what you see there is the next day, Lucretia comes to her family and tells them what's happened. She admits that she has been raped by Tarquin. You can see just how anguished they are. You can see everybody is gathered around her. She has collapsed in shame. Because of what Tarquin did, her family has now been dishonored. She obviously wasn't the perpetrator, she was the victim, but by being the victim, she feels that she has brought dishonor on her family. Act 3, the final act, is in the center. She decides that the only way that she can preserve the honor of her family is to commit suicide. The consequence of her action, the consequence of her suicide, is that Brutus, one of the soldiers with her husband, rallies the soldiers. It causes an uproar, and he rallies the soldiers against this tyrannical ruler whose son has raped one of his compatriots' wives, and they overthrow the king. And this becomes this is the catalyst for the end of the Roman Empire and the beginning of a republican government.
So many men in power that have caused a lot of violence towards women and how they just kind of get away with it. And I read about the story of Lucretia. I was like, well, here it is. That's like that to me, this story and this painting to me says powerful men can get away with anything, including murder. Made me think about the role in women now and in society, and how, yes, we've over the centuries have been able to get some equality, but we are still not there.
If we are looking today to try to understand how we've gotten to a point where the suppression of women's rights, where violence against women has become a sort of normative behavior, or has become very much so embedded in our culture that people don't even ask the question of like, what's going on in this painting or in that story, then we have to understand where that came from. And I think that the story of Lucretia gives us one really exceptional example of how it became so embedded in our culture, because this story was one of the foundation legends of ancient Rome that was adopted across history later on, like in the Renaissance, as a fundamental tenet of how that culture viewed itself.
I started learning a little bit more about the story of Lucretia and just saw so many parallels to what's happening today. And so that's why I chose this painting to do a response to. My response piece is called SilenceBreakers. We started this, creating this piece looking at the different movements or the different acts within the story of Lucretia. In the music itself, you'll hear strings. There's also obviously percussion that I added, and it begins with the introduction, and you'll hear a heartbeat, and that heartbeat actually represents Lucretia's heartbeat and what is about to happen. The king's son is the second piece, is still part of the first piece, and it goes into the second piece. And in my response, basically it's the conversation between Lucretia and this man. And what's happening there is a struggle between them. And so you'll hear the struggle in the music, in the movement. And then it goes into Lucretia killing herself. Our third movement in SilenceBreakers is the rebellion piece, when the soldiers rebel because of what happened to Lucretia, because she killed herself. And what does this mean? You kind of feel that kind of like get ready for battle type feel. I decided that I would take this opportunity to do a piece with my life partner, with my husband, David Szebeda. And it was the best idea I've ever had, because we came together and really talked about the story. I played around with different instruments that I own, different percussion instruments, and then I landed on using my congas and then using the barril from bomba. So I started just playing around with different sounds and feelings within the song, and with the composition itself, with the musical composition. When we were recording, I would engineer the session for him, and he would engineer the session for me when we were recording our different pieces. I always wanted to also dance to it, and so Once we created the piece, that's when I started kind of doing some movement to it. I want the story of Lucretia to not be lost. I want SilenceBreakers, the Me Too movement, everything that people have been fighting for, to not be lost. In viewing my performance, whether it's watching me dance, watching me drum, or listening to the music itself, I want people to kind of feel engaged. I don't want to prescribe it for anyone, but I do want a sense of this feeling of what's happening in this music. Kind of like that feeling I had when I first saw the Story of Lucretia painting. It's like, what is happening in this painting? And so in our piece, in SilenceBreakers, there's so much going on, so many pieces to the story. There's so many different instruments coming in and out. And so I kind of just want people to feel. Whatever that is, I just want that.